Hey everyone, welcome back to the stream. We have Dylan Babbs who decided to make another appearance on this episode. Conned him into it, I think. But he's back to demonstrate his amazing CSS and animation skills, right?
I am back. Yes, things did not go exactly as planned last time. We spent a good, 20 to 25 minutes debugging some silly CSS. But we're back today, and don't worry, we've practiced exactly what we're going to be showing you. So hopefully there's not going to be any big hiccups that will take up most of the episode.
We figured it out in the end, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice debugging session. We had our rubber duck as the audience who we just kept talking to.
Yep.
And we eventually figured it out. So it was a good learning experience. We now know that whenever you're transitioning CSS elements, you always have to initially set a value, even if it's going to be 0 or none or something like that. You have to do that. You can't transition from a value that doesn't exist.
Yep.
Which is kind of funny because I remember that's what I said in the beginning of the stream, and that was what was giving us the problem most of the time.
One thing I learned from that stream, which I went and tried later, didn't actually work. So maybe you can show us again for this stream. But I actually tried to do a hard refresh with that refresh button in Chrome. Could not get that little menu to pop up.
That's because you probably didn't have your developer tools open.
Ah.
So if you hold down on the refresh button right now, you'll see nothing happens.
Oh, I don't have your screen up yet.
Oh, okay.
Just our webcams.
Oh, there's no need to show the screen. You just got to have the console or the developer tools open, and then you hold down the hard refresh.
Got it. Got it. I will try that again in this stream. So just some logistical stuff. So we're live right now. We'll be answering questions in the chat. If we get stumped again, and you spotted our issue, just go ahead and type it in the chat so that way we can collaborate together on it. Man, Dylan, do you want do any shameless plugs right now?
No shameless plugs for now.
Not yet. We'll save them till later.
Maybe if I think of something else, I could shamelessly plug it, but nothing.
All right. Well, I'm switching over to your screen. So now people can see your screen. They can also see the chat box, which wasn't visible previously. So maybe you want to walk us through what our goals are for this particular episode.
Yes. So today we'll be doing collapsible CSS divs. Pretty much for things that you could create drop downs and other content containers that you want to change the height of. So this is sometimes a little bit of a tricky problem with CSS because you cannot actually transition elements that you don't know the exact size of. So this is going to be something that we're going to be building. We have these drop downs right now, and you'll see that all these are different sizes. So normally with CSS, what you might have to do is change the height of the closed state to 0, and then change the height of the open state to whatever height this is. But what if you have a bunch of different content in here in a reusable component that changes depending on the state that it's in or the part of the application that you're using it in? You're not going to be able to know the height of it every single time. I mean, you do have the option to calculate the height, but sometimes that's not the easiest thing. So we'll be showing you a trick to not have to calculate the height when opening and closing these containers using the CSS property of max height.
Are we going to see any kind of scenarios where that list might be very long and we don't want it to be infinite height?
Yeah, we could do it in that situation.
Like, are we able to scroll as well?
Yeah, we could do some scrollable things. Just be sure to remind me when we're doing that in implementation, and we'll handle that edge case.
All right. Yeah, so that's...
Yeah, so today we'll be working with React, and we'll be creating something like this. Probably by the end of the video, we'll have a little bit of a differently styled component, something a little bit nicer than this. But this is a pretty basic skeleton preview of what you can expect we'll be building today.
Awesome. Let's see it. Let's crack open some code. Let's make this possible.
Cool. So first things first, since we'll be doing React with this, let's go and create a React application. So we'll use the nice create-react app.
Are we using React components for this? Or are we using React hooks? Or does it not matter?
I'm going to be using the classes.
All right.
So I think it's not components for hooks, I believe. I believe it's classes for hooks. Because they're both components, they're just different syntax of writing them.
Yeah. But
the class is you use the ES6 methods. Then you also have some React mounting methods like component and mount, component to update. But then hooks kind of take those away, and you use something called use effect and use state.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different way of working with things. So if you do prefer to use hooks while we use the class components, it will work pretty much the same way.
Got it.
So creating the application, I'm just going to call this collapsible. So yeah, spelling that right. We'll go ahead and enter.
Oh yeah, I've misspelled it a ton of times. I think that's wrong. It might be an A, but I could be wrong. Instead of an I. Or there could be like a European version of it.
No, I think it's an I at the end. So I think I actually got that right. Usually when I'm on these live streams, I'm always spelling everything wrong and making spelling mistakes. But I think for once I might have gotten that right.
So then I've been spelling it wrong then for today. So one of us is doing it wrong. Might as well be me.
No worries, man. No worries.
Oh, you used MPX. Isn't that going to make it take forever?
As opposed to what?
I don't know. Should I come back tomorrow?
No, it should be done anytime soon. I think the difference between MPX is that it actually deletes all.
It does what? I lost your sound.
The difference between NPX and NPM is that NPX deletes all the associated files for installing it. So then you get a nice template.
Are your AirPods low on battery? You had cut out there for just a second.
No, they're not low on battery, but maybe something's wrong with the Bluetooth connection. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You just cut out for like 5 seconds.
Yeah, if that happens again, let me know.
Yep. So while that's doing its thing, you're Babbs D on Twitter, or you're D Babbs on Twitter, right?
D Babbs, correct.
So I'm gonna go ahead and share
D
that.
for Dylan, and then my last name Babbs. Yeah, go ahead and share that. I always tweet about some nice map and visualization stuff. So we'll CD into our directory. We'll open it up in VS Code. And then we will also start the development server with yarn start.
So you're using yarn too, huh?
Yeah, so that was actually my next question. Of all the controversial things that we talk about here, let's go into another mindless debate. NPM or yarn?
You're going to use Parcel too, or whatever that other Webpack off-brand one was?
I don't even know what Parcel is, to be honest.
It might not be called Parcel. Using alternatives in this stream then.
And yeah, we're back here with the light stream as well. So yeah, we got the normal React boilerplate of their nice little Jimmy Neutron Atom.
No, I always think that's cool. I didn't think that you could animate an SVG like that. I thought it was a GIF for the longest time.
No, it's nice. You just do a rotation. And in fact, today during the stream, we'll be doing some rotations with CSS Transform as well.
Sweet.
Yeah, what I thought was pretty cool about their animation is, I guess I've actually never seen this before, but I assume this is some sort of accessibility setting that you can do in CSS.
Yeah.
They have the at media query, so you could query some certain things. If the user prefers reduced motion, if they don't like motion, so I guess if sometimes people don't react well to things moving fast. I don't know really the exact situation.
It could be like an epilepsy
thing. Actually, yeah, something like that. There's actually a CSS setting for that, which I thought was pretty cool. And it was nice of React to include this in the Create React app, because I'm sure a lot of people just like me are finding out that this media query exists just by looking through here.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, we'll get rid of all this extra CSS, and then we will go ahead and just create some boilerplates. So let's just send everything in the middle of the map. Not the map, sorry. Geez, I'm doing too many maps. I'm saying center the map. I mean, center the page. Do margin 20 pixels and then auto. So this should create a centered container. Yeah. And then also have 20 pixels on the top and bottom. Then we'll just test this out, make sure it's working. Nice, we got it centered. And then we'll go ahead and create a component. We'll just call this collapsible.
Yeah. Why did it spaz out with the big React symbol? Is that because it didn't fully load?
Yeah, I think it's because I deleted the CSS before I changed the HTML.
Got it.
So we had, and then we'll go ahead and create some CSS with this as well. So I prefer Sass.
Yeah.
Mostly because it's easier to keep track of your subcomponent styles by just basically writing the style within the style. So you do something like app and then header like this instead of having to do app header.
And it plays
And then
nice
there's some
with
other
React out of the
functionality.
box, right?
Correct. You do have to do one thing, which is to install a module called node-sas, but this just takes a second and then it works well. All you have to do is just change the file names to .scss instead of CSS.
So it's not already baked into Webpack? Because that's what React uses, right? Webpack?
Yeah. No, by default, I don't believe it is baked into Webpack, but I'm not completely sure on that. And then we'll go ahead and write the skeleton for our class component. So we'll import React components. Component is just the component from React. And then we'll import our style as well. So import collapsible. Yeah, we're having more spelling problems here. Just kidding.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a rough time with this.
Class collapse.
React. Oh, I just heard my AirPods go off. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It looks like it's playing from a different speaker this time.
I don't know why they keep switching.
How about now?
I can hear him again. Is it trying to pair up with your phone or something at the same time, or somebody else's computer?
Who knows? They always work so well with my iPhone, but then with my laptop, sometimes it's a little hit or miss with the success rate. So in the constructor, just do the normal stuff you got to do.
Yeah.
And then we'll do our render method, which will have our HTML we'll want to render. And then we'll add in collapsible as the class name. And we'll just write a little hello there again. And then we will want to export this as the default module for this file. So cool. So now we have a nice little component that will just print out hello. So just for our sanity, let's go ahead and render this component. So import collapsible from components/collapsible. All right, here's another random question I have. So I noticed a lot of people, obviously you capitalize the file names for classes and components.
Do you?
But I see that's usually the agreed upon syntax, I think, here.
I never do
but what
that.
I don't, you
No.
don't? Oh, wow.
Oh, lowercase all the way.
But what I see differently all the time is whether people capitalize the folder name for the components. So I know Gatsby has I've been using that a little bit, playing around, and they're very strict on the lowercase folder name for components.
Really?
But create React app and a lot of other React people are always doing uppercases. And it's just something that's keeping me up all night, whether to capitalize my component folder and stuff like that. But we'll see. We'll see my latest opinion on that eventually. Collapsible. Yeah, we gotta render this guy collapsible. So we cannot find collapsible.
Is it a spelling mistake? You used an uppercase somewhere and a lowercase somewhere else, I think.
Oh
wait, no, never mind.
Oh no, my folder was called component instead of components, so that should fix it.
Hold on.
Collapsible. Let's just copy the path to this.
You copied the relative path?
I'm just editing it. It's the full one. There we go. I don't know what was going on
Spelling
there.
issue probably. Oh, you didn't include the JS? I don't think you need the JS though.
Yeah, but the JS, yeah, Webpack fixes that. If you're doing normal vanilla JavaScript, you need the JS, but not now.
Yeah.
Cool. So now we got a nice little component. You know, it's really doing us a lot right here. We got our hello. So what we'll want to do in order to create something like this is inside this component, we'll want to have two divs. One will be the part that will always be shown. This is kind of like the main tab bar, I guess. And then we'll have the component, I'm sorry, not the component, the container to house our children. So we could be really creative and use some great names like top and bottom for this.
Well, I mean, that,
unless you have any better ideas.
No, I mean, Tailwind uses those kind of naming convention, don't they? They try to use real words.
I don't know. I haven't used Tailwind. I know of it. It looks nice, but I haven't tried it. But yeah, we'll just go with top and bottom for now. So we'll go ahead and reflect those class names in our HTML as well. So on the top, we'll want to do something like just click here. Oh, we're in the wrong one. And then let's also go ahead and style this a little bit. We'll do height of maybe 30 pixels. Right now, we'll do a border 1 pixel solid, gray, just so we get a little bit of an outline. Oh, and then also let's change the width of our app.
You have someone agreeing with you on the capitalization of the component class files, J12Y.
Oh, our boy J12Y. Yeah, I realized who Dolby.io was last time. That totally makes sense now. I think beforehand we were like, Dolby.io, what could that be? So,
yep.
Nice to see you.
Yes, thanks for joining J12Y.
J12Y. And then we'll also use our nice buddy Flexbox here for 2 reasons. One is we want to center this. Obviously, an easy way to do it would just be to add top and bottom padding of equal sizes. Yep. But I also want to use Flexbox because we're going to want to be putting in this nice little arrow button, and we want to have them on different sides of the div. So to do that, we'll also be using the justify content of space between. So justify content is for stuff on the x-axis, so horizontal, and space between will separate them. And then also align items is for things on the y-axis, so things going vertical. And we'll want to do center because we want those to be centered. And right now, since we don't have anything to add, we don't have our arrow button. Let's go ahead and actually add that. So I like to use the Material UI icons, a nice open source set of probably about 1,000 icons. We also use these in our last stream as well.
Yep.
And let's just look for something like down. Yeah, we could do expand more. So let's go ahead and copy this. And what's nice is they have these nice little React things you just copy and paste. I know it just probably saves 5 seconds, but it's still pretty nice to have. And then before we go ahead, let's also make sure to add the modules into our so Material UI / icons. And then we also need Material UI / core. For some reason, whenever I install just Material UI / icons, it doesn't install the dependency needed for Material UI core as well. I don't know if that's just something wrong that I'm doing or something wrong with my machine, but it's always been kind of a weird thing going on there.
I've never actually used Material UI, but I know that it's like the most popular React layer right now, right?
That I'm not sure, to be honest.
It always seems
I've never actually. I think a lot of people like Material UI because it's from Google and people are like, it's from Google, must be good. And it's kind of really good publicity from it. I know it's pretty popular.
Are you sure it's from Google, or is it just a community-driven project that tries to replicate material design for Android?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's officially from Google or who made it at first, but it definitely aligns with the Google design system. Let's see what's going on. It's still compiling. Nice. So we got our little arrow right there. And let's increase the spacing a little bit here as well, make it look a little nicer. On the left and right side, let's add maybe 10 pixels of spacing. So right now, padding. Right now I'm using the shorthand CSS for padding. So the first one is going to be top and bottom, and then the second digit is going to be left and right.
I always get those mixed up.
Yeah, where I still don't remember, to be honest, is when you have all 4 at once. I know it starts with top, but after that, I don't know where else it goes. So usually if I need to do all 4 custom values or 3 that are different, what I'll do is I'll just write the first 2, and then I'll just do padding bottom of like 3px.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And basically what this does is it overwrites the top one. It's a little bit easier to read too as well, because even if you know how to write it and you know how to read the 4-digit one, what a colleague doesn't know it off the top of their head as well. So it's a little bit easier that way. And then let's also make the height of this maybe 40 pixels, a little nicer. Cool. So now we got our top going. Now let's work on the bottom. So the bottom, let's just set a background of something like light gray, so we'd easily differentiate it. And then we will also want to add some content in there. So we'll do, hey there, Nick.
All right.
Cool. And let's add 3 or 4 of these in for now. But I don't like this text line. The center, I believe that's coming from the CSS in the Create React app. Yeah, the text line center. And then also let's go ahead and add some padding into these individual items. So it's a little bit nicer spaced out. We'll do 10 pixels on the top. I'll actually do 10 pixels on both. I got 3 Ds there instead of 2. Oh no, actually. We also want to create a separate class for each item. Right now it's adding the padding on the bottom container. We want to do it for each one. So we'll do class name is item. And we'll just go ahead and copy and paste that for now. Do we have any chatter coming so far in from the chat?
Not a whole lot of chatter. I think everyone's shy. We have people definitely in the chat, just chilling and watching, lurking. We do invite you to participate.
Yeah, Mike Wilson, if you're out there, say hello. We want to hear your feedback.
Mike Wilson, who's that?
Mike Wilson, he's a friend of mine. I told him to join. He said he wanted to improve his front-end skills.
Got it. Yeah, if you're lurking in the
chat. So Michael,
chat.
now's your time to ask some questions.
Yep.
So yeah, now we have basically the skeleton set up for our nice little drop down. But what we should do is add a couple more of these on the screen so we can see how they all interact together. And then we also want to change the amount of rows we have in each one, just so we could prove that this technique works with containers of different sizes. So first, let's just add maybe 2 or 3 more collapsibles. Now we should have a lot more on the screen. And good thing we did that, because now I remembered we also have to add some top and bottom margin for these collapsibles, so there's some space between them. So we'll just do margin maybe of 10 pixels on both. Let's do 20 for a little bit more. And then we'll want to change the amount of rows we have in each one. So to do that, in the class constructor, we're going to create a new variable within the constructor. So we'll do this.num items, and we'll do a random number. So math.random. We'll do maybe times.
We've got
6.
Jaguar Vision saying that they're lurking and enjoying the stream.
Nice, Jaguar Vision. Good to hear. So we're going to create a random number here. So we're doing that with math.random, which creates a value between 0 and 1. And then we'll multiply that by 6. So we can have maybe up to 6 boxes at once. And then we also have to use math.floor. The reason for that is that we need a whole number, because we're going to be using this number to create an empty array, which will be mapping through in our render function.
Got it.
So we'll create, well, first we need to do the squigglies. We'll do array of num items.
Do you call them squiggly brackets or curly brackets?
What do you call them?
I call them curlies. Curly brackets.
I know one time in a job interview a long time ago, I was super nervous something going on, and then I just couldn't figure out the name for them. I was like so lost. You know when you get shocked or you like freeze up, and I was like, crap, what are they called? What are they called? So we'll create a new array of length num items. This is a nice function for that. Just wrap it in an array. However, you cannot map over this yet, mostly because it just creates an array of length num items, but it's going to be empty array. So you can't actually map through it. So what you have to do is use the fill function, and you can just fill with anything. We'll just do 0 for now. And now what this does is it creates an array of length num items, all with zeros. And then we'll do map. And then the 2 parameters, I always like to call them item and index. Obviously, there's some better names for these as well. Item is obviously going to be whatever you need in the array, and then index is going to be the number. And then also you need to use index for the key value in React. So in React, whenever you have multiple different list items, you need to have the key so React knows how to render them properly. So we'll be creating the div of class name, I believe it was item. Nice. And then we'll do key of index.
And again, the reason why we're doing this is so that way we have a bunch of different boxes that are randomly sized, right?
Correct. So when each component is rendered, it's going to have its own number that it wants to render. Basically, we're calculating right here with math.random. And then we'll be using that to create the num items. And then so a lot of you guys might be wondering why we're not doing it inside of state, or we're not doing it inside of num items here. That's because if we were calculating the random inside of render, the random number would be changing every single time. So it might start to look a little wonky. So it's nice to do it in the constructor here, because then you'll have the same value throughout the whole component lifecycle. Or not lifecycle, the component's life.
Makes sense.
Sounds funny. Yeah. So let's check that out. So num items is not defined, because I got to do this.num items because it's a local variable for that class. Nice. So you'll see that we have everything from 4, 4, 5 to 3 items. Yeah, so let's start making these things collapsible. So the first thing we want to do is create an item inside of state called open. So this basically means that if this Boolean is true, that we want to open the component, and if it's closed, we want to have it closed.
And we're doing all of this without jQuery, right? This is pure vanilla JavaScript and CSS, with the exception of React.
Correct. I mean, I don't think anyone has ever used jQuery with React, have they?
I've probably tried to use it at some point in time. I try to use it with everything.
I think there are some nice helper functions in jQuery that might be helpful, but nothing for manipulating the DOM.
Sure.
I mean, I guess you could use it because, there are sometimes things in vanilla JavaScript that you still need to do within React in terms of getting sizes for things if you're doing pretty complex layouts and such. Yeah. So I guess you could use jQuery for that, but that would be an interesting combination. Yeah, so anyway, what we want to do is go into the bottom component, and we're going to write some inline styles here. And the reason we're doing inline styles instead of just using the class is because these are going to be changing depending on the state. So it's a little bit easier to do it with the JavaScript instead of the CSS classes. Obviously, it is still possible to do with CSS classes inside of React, but I find this way a little bit easier. For example, within the inline styles, you could do, if this.open, you could do height of 20 pixels, and when it's closed, you do 0 pixels. And the equivalent with the classes for this would be to have something like open and then closed, where you have height 0 and then maybe height 100 px. And then depending on the state, you would just add the class name string to this class name attributes. But I think for certain things, it's better just to do it inside the inline styles. So I guess my mentality on this is I like to keep pretty much 90% of all my styles inside of the CSS file, especially when it comes to hovers, because it's really easy to write hovers in normal CSS as opposed to the inline JSS. But for things that depend on the state, that are either just 1 or 2 items, for example, height or maybe opacity, then I will write them inside of a style here instead of adding them to a class. And then also, since we're going to be JavaScript developers, we have to destructure every nested item for absolutely no reason other than that it looks absolutely sick to have that curly bracket.
Not a squiggly bracket?
I already adapted to the cooler way of saying it. I'm a fast learner, as you can tell.
I don't know. I've just never heard somebody say squiggly bracket before, so this is a new one for me. Maybe it's the hip thing to do. Maybe I'm doing it the old way.
No, they definitely don't adapt my way of talking. And then also, yeah, so we did the heights. So when the state is open, we're going to want to do a height of 100 pixels. And then when the state is closed, we want to do a height of 0, which makes sense. However, as you can see, this is not necessarily our intended behavior here. This does not look good.
Yeah.
This looks like some modern art. Although this look very nice in some sort of Berlin gallery. We're not in Berlin right now. We're in California and we're writing CSS. So we want to make things look nice. We want to develop good products that are useful, not have people say, what the hell is going on here?
It's not an artistic statement.
No, that will be next week on the stream.
Got it.
So in order to fix that, we're going to be doing a CSS property inside of bottom called overflow hidden. And what this will do is basically hide anything that is not within the height and width of the div. So since we have the div bottom set to height 0, everything's going to be hidden because obviously nothing can be shown if you have an element that is 0 things tall. I just said 0 things tall, 0 pixels tall. Nice. So the next thing we want to do is let's add some functionality to this button to actually be able to open and close these. So we'll go into our icon. We have this nice little component right here, and we'll set an on-click event. So whenever the user clicks this, we'll want to perform an action. So we'll do an arrow function to execute something whenever this is clicked. And we'll do this.setState. And we'll want to be modifying the open variable. So when it's closed, we want it to open. And when it's open, we want it to close. So all we have to do is just set it to its opposite value.
Sure.
So this is a Boolean. So we just get the opposite by putting the exclamation mark in. Now, when we click on this, you'll see that these open and close. However, you will notice that we have this set to a constant height, and that's not what we want to do. The whole point of this exercise was to have the variable height work on these collapsibles. So the trick for doing this is using the max height value instead of height. So what we'll want to do is make sure our bottom is set to height auto, and then we'll go back to our inline styles here. Instead of using the height, we'll use max height. And then all we need to do is have the first value be larger than whatever our max height of any of our containers will be. So because we have, let's see, our height of each item is probably going to be about 30 pixels because we have 10 pixels of padding on, let's open this real quick.
But then you also,
on the top.
You also have to take into consideration the size of the font though, no?
Correct.
Yeah.
But all you have to do is do a max height. So it doesn't really matter what number that is. You could do something pretty large or pretty somewhat small, as long as it's larger than the children.
We lost you again.
300 because
your earbuds cut out for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Cool. All we have to do is just have a value that's going to be larger than any of your children. So that shouldn't be too hard to do. We'll just do 300 for now because we have a max of 6 values, and those are all at 30. I believe it's 38 of what we saw that was. We'll just do 6 times 4.
Makes sense.
Yeah. 6 times 4, 240. So we'll just do 250 right now as our max height. So now when we click on this,
break. Oh, there we go.
We see that it's only going up to the max. I'm sorry, only going up to the height of the children, which is nice.
Sure.
So we have 4 here, 2 there, and you'll see that it's not all constant heights. So we'll just refresh. We'll have different values as well, and we'll see this work. So that's awesome to have. But what we should do is add a transition value to this.
Yeah.
So it looks a little nicer when they open. Gets a nice fluid movement in there. So we'll want to go back to our bottom element in the CSS, and we'll do transition 0.3 seconds of max height. A bad habit of mine is I always just do all here instead of the actual property, and that sometimes leads to some unintended side effects. So I'm really trying to get better at just writing the specific value that I'm transitioning there. So we'll save that, let that refresh. Not working. Maybe we'll just, oh, it's because I'm doing the JSS property value. Because when you're doing the inline styles, you have to do the camel case instead of the normal CSS properties
Yeah.
that I written with, I believe, what is this called? Kebab case?
Yeah, kebab case.
Kebab case. I like kebab
Yeah.
case. That's a good case.
It's thrown me off before. Whenever I use React, I always want to use the kebab case, but I always forget that it's special for React.
Is it special for React or is that any type of JSS framework? But yeah,
Well,
it might
I
just
mean,
be
when I use
React.
Angular and Vue, I don't have to do anything special. But then again, Angular and Vue don't really have this special inlining that React has. It's different. I don't know. Or maybe I'm not using it
Yeah,
as I should.
yeah, I think it would be nice to actually no, I think you might be wrong because when you're using the DOM API in vanilla JavaScript,
Yes.
for example, let's just take a look at like document.query
Yeah.
selector. We'll just do all. And if you want to modify the style, you would do style. And then you also write that in camel case.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't actually use it like that, so that would explain why I'm not familiar.
Yeah, so my guess, obviously I don't know, and I may be wrong, is that this may not be React specific. It's just using the normal DOM API. But if anybody in the audience knows, that'd be a good thing for someone to let us know.
Yep. Jaguar Vision,
But
it's all
anyway,
you. What's the answer, Jaguar Vision?
but yeah, back to our CSS file. So we have to write this in kebab case here. So now hopefully, at the risk of not embarrassing myself, hopefully it will work now so we don't go down a whole nother rabbit hole like last episode of our transitions. Nice. It
There
works.
you go.
Perfect. So we have this nice fluid motion. I guess that is 0. So you could also do some timing functions so you can ease in the transition. So it starts a little slower, goes faster by the end. But I think for this situation, we could just keep it linear or whatever the browser does by default. I think sometimes browsers actually use ease out as the default because it looks a little bit more natural. It's the way that humans perceive motion is a little bit more natural with a timing function rather than just a linear curve. And then let's also make this a little bit larger and then potentially add a couple more items.
Jaguar Vision's giving us the thumbs up.
Nice. Thanks, Jaguar Vision. It means a lot to us. But what we should also do is animate this arrow button because right now, this arrow button going down gives us the affordance that you could open something and someone will expand. Yeah. But we also want to give the affordance that you can close this as well. So ideally, we're going to have these switch spots, basically pointing down when it's closed and pointing up when it's open. So to do so, we can go back into our inline styles. And the reason I'm doing inline here is because this is an item that depends on the state of the components. So I'll go to our expand more icon, and we'll be using the transform property. And then we'll want to do, if it's open, we'll want to rotate 0. No, we'll want to rotate 180 degrees. That means flipping it upside down. And then if it's not open, we just want to keep it how it is. So we'll just do rotate 0 degree.
So I wouldn't have thought to use the transform. I would have thought to just maybe use like a expand less icon and do like a React conditional. Is that not the recommended approach?
So that is an option, but in a second, you'll see why I did this.
All right.
This goes up and down.
Yeah.
And so the option, also let's add a minimum here. So we at least get 1.
I mean, this does seem fancy and it's probably more lightweight because you're not including a ton of icons that are not necessary, right?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple of benefits to this. So the other option would be you just add a second icon and you switch between them, the up and the down.
Yep.
But the benefit of this is that, one, you don't need 2 different icon files, but I'm going to add a little transition.
Oh, you're going to fancy it up then.
So 2.3 seconds all. You'll now see that this rotates. So if we're using two different icons, you can now get this nice little effect on it as well.
This is a fancy little application.
Not too fancy, you know. We're just getting started here.
I don't know. You're definitely a CSS artist.
I like to focus, I think, a little bit too much time on this type of stuff.
Design?
Yeah. But we also need to make sure this looks clickable. Because right now you'll see our cursor is just the normal pointer. So although that is pretty obvious that you should click here,
yep.
I don't know why people would think that you should click there. Nothing to do with all that text there.
Yeah.
But we should also change the pointer of the cursor to make it look like it's clickable.
So we're going to change
to do
the whole block to be clickable, or just certain components of that?
Just the top part. So you see I'm editing the top class, which is just what's visible right here. So adding cursor pointer, well, now on hover, you'll see get this new cursor. I don't know if you guys could actually see it in the screen. It might be too small, but now it has the cursor that is clickable. So it makes it a little bit more obvious. And then also one thing I'm noticing too, that's a little bit frustrating, is we have the cursor icon, the cursor pointer on the whole top part, but clicking on it doesn't do anything because we only attach the on-click event to the icon. So what we should do is go back to our component and change the on-click handler to the entire top div instead of just the icon. Because now users can click and then just the icon. It does both.
Sweet. So now I want to go back to the original question I asked. What happens if we say we want to restrict it to maybe 6, but yet more items than 6 appear in that list and we want to scroll? Is that possible easily?
Hold on, my AirPods died again. Yeah.
Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Nice. Yeah, so we could do that. So what we'll want to do is we'll keep it 300 pixels, but to really prove your point, let's jack up the number of items we have here, maybe 20. And then what we do is we go to our bottom section in the CSS, and we use overflow scroll.
Even though we previously added overflow hidden in that bottom one?
Correct.
Got it.
Oh, interesting. No, interesting. You have a good point here. So yeah, so if we have overflow scroll and overflow hidden here, obviously that's not going to work because I guess
it is working.
I wasn't expecting that, to be honest.
Well, we got lucky this time. Does it scroll properly?
Yeah, it scrolls properly. But yeah, what I would have said is, in most situations, for some reason I feel like this shouldn't work. This is just some special situation.
Yeah.
Is what we would do is go into our HTML and then add in another bottom. So we could do something like class name bottom content.
Yeah.
And then what I would do is set this overflow to scroll, and then set the top one, basically the container for that content one, to hidden. So that would make the bottom one still scrollable, and then the top one hidden on collapse.
Sure.
But to be quite honest, I was a little surprised at this. I didn't think this would work.
Do you want to change the scroll to be only overflow in the y-axis and not the? It looks like it has the potential for both.
That's a good idea, because then we get this weird scroll area on the bottom that we don't really need because we're not scrolling. Exactly. So yeah, we'll want to change the overflow X to scroll. I'm sorry, no, to just Y. Just Y. Yeah. Nice. So also I have another question for our audience, if maybe someone can help me out here. I don't know why, but sometimes I get this weird quirk with the scroll bars where sometimes the background is visible and sometimes it's not. Because what you'll see is what's going on here is that this scroll bar actually makes the width of these elements, it pushes it it minimizes it. So basically, if we didn't have a scroll bar here,
Yeah.
it's fine. And hopefully one of these don't have a scroll bar. And it looks like they all
The
do.
gray would extend to the edge, right?
Correct. And I've seen some situations where the scroll bar is basically just an element that's floating on top and it doesn't change it. And I don't know why, because it's all been in the same browser and it's just been in different situations, but sometimes the scroll bar is different. So if anybody has any ideas on that, let me know, because sometimes the scroll bar changing the width of the content really drives me crazy.
Yeah. I feel like I've done this at some point, but I couldn't tell you how I did it.
Yeah.
Because I know what you're saying. Would it help to put a layer behind it that does take like a parent container? That
How so?
well, what if we? I mean, I'm no CSS expert. Well, what if we had a parent container that was the width and the height of the actual box, and then this scrollable drop-down area, only the child that contained this particular list was scrollable. Because then the scroll bar wouldn't change the padding or the margin on the parent, only the child that was actually scrollable, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense,
Seems
but
a little
still
hacky.
that might affect that still might affect the children though.
Could, yeah.
If you don't want to have the children, yeah. Uh-huh. But anyway, I think before we wrap this up, let's just make this look a little bit nicer. What do you say?
I think it looks pretty nice. You're saying we could do better?
Oh yeah, we can make this look better. So let's go a lighter gray. We'll maybe do so RGBA of 000, and then we'll just do 0.05 as the opacity. I gotta add my colon there. It's a little bit lighter. I think it looks nice. And then we'll also change the how the top looks. So let's do a border radius 3 pixels, and let's make this color like a dark. So background, and then we'll get rid of the border. We'll make the color white. That's too dark, like 0.7. Oh no. Yeah, just some nice rounded edges. Always look a little bit better. We'll make the height 45 pixels. And we got some better looking pills now. We also want to make the bottom. So border, bottom, left radius, 3 pixels. And then we'll also want to do border, bottom, right radius at 3 pixels. The reason I'm doing just the bottom is because we want this to be nice and curled.
Yeah, but not the top.
But we don't want it up there. And you'll see also our scroll thing is screwing us up a little bit here.
Axe it.
So sometimes what I do is you could also just hide the scroll bar in some situations to kind of build your own, which will look a little bit nicer. But now we have the nice animating arrow right here. We got some nice rounded edges for pills, let's say. Nice instead of
you're gonna have to teach me some more witchcraft that you're doing. How are you zooming into a particular part of the screen like that?
I don't know if you can see my face right now, but I'm moving my camera down. Can you see my mouse and my trackpad?
Sort of.
Basically, I'm just doing, if you have an iPhone, the zoom gesture on my Mac. And that lets you zoom
but you're
nice.
like zooming into a particular portion of the screen.
Yeah. What's nice is because it's not the normal zoom of a website where you just make the font and div size bigger.
Yeah.
This is, I don't know how you would actually call it, but it's kind of a similar zoom to what you see on an iPhone Safari zoom, which is helpful because if you do want to zoom into certain elements, you could just do that like this without making everything much larger. I think it basically just keeps the nice aspect ratio of the whole page.
Yeah, I didn't know that was the thing, that you could zoom in with the trackpad like that to a specific spot of the screen.
And do you have a Mac?
I do, but I guess maybe it's because I always just use the Command Plus and zoom the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, different use cases, so depends on what you're trying to do. So we completed this exercise, and luckily we did not run into any major problems.
Not this time, right?
Yeah, things are looking nice.
It looks fabulous.
Yeah, I hope this is helpful to everyone. You can go ahead and implement this. Just remember the trick is max height instead of height. I think also a different way of doing this, I think we could actually, let's go ahead and try this right now. It's going to involve some Googling. Is what we could do is calculate the height of each item and then set it to that on the open. However, I think there is one downfall to the solution, and I think we'll figure this out in 2 minutes. It shouldn't take long. So the first thing to do is we'll need to create a React ref. A React ref is basically a reference to an item on the DOM that you want to get the values out of. So you would just do something like this bottom container, because we want to reference this bottom div, and then you would do react.create ref. And then inside of the JSX item, you want to do ref, and then you just set it to this bottom container. So now you'll see that when the component renders, component did mount. The component did mount is basically the first lifecycle method for when the stuff is rendered on the DOM. We can now print and see what it looks like. So we'll do this bottom container. And then we'll take a look over at our console. And you'll see that we now have this HTML.
Can you stretch that
node.
console?
I think it's.
We're getting blocked by some of my overlays.
Yeah,
there we go.
Can you see it now? You now have a normal div, and this would, I don't believe it is the exact same thing, but it's something very similar to what you would do if you were doing document.querySelector of bottom. But let's take a look at this. And then also one quick thing before we go and print it. You do need to add a current, because the React ref adds a nested object. Because I believe you could use this to compare previous versions of the node versus current versions.
Got it.
Well, let's take a look at what these two things are.
You're having some problems there.
Yeah, my AirPods died again. So yeah, you'll see that these are pretty much identical. So on collapsible line 18, we have the react.ref, and then we have the document.querySelector here. But obviously, using the React ref is much safer than using the query selector, because if you're using the React ref, you're obviously using everything that works with React, and obviously these things are going to work better together rather than throwing in your own query selector API.
Yeah.
But what we'll want to do is create a variable called this.height, and we will set this to 0 for now. But when the component mounts, we will want to actually get the height of our bottom container. So we will do something like const height equals this.bottom container .current .offset height. So offset height is basically the DOM calculation of the height of that item. And this is different than like CSS height, because you could set a value to like height here, and it may not return this, because if your item has already been modified by another JavaScript function, or if you have some weird padding in there and such, it will actually get you the height of it, of what it's rendering on the screen. So let's just console.log this to make sure everything's going well and we're not having any problems. No. Yeah, set to 0. And that is because we're setting it to 0 manually. So what we should do is just get rid of that max height for now. Yeah, now you'll see that we have the different values. So the first one, it is 494 pixels, and the second one is 646. So what we'll want to do is we'll do the state is open. We will want to set the height to this.height. Because we're calculating the height of it on mount, and then we're assigning it to this variable, which we could then use over here. And then when it is closed, we'll want to do 0 pixels as well. So I believe this should work, but it might give us some problems. Yeah, so the problem is that we are initially set it to 0. So we cannot actually get the height because maybe we could do auto. Because we're setting it to auto, yeah. So yeah, so if we do this dot height when it's open and then auto when it's closed, we then are able to calculate the height. But then this is the problem I was talking about. If you have to set the height to auto initially, how do you keep it closed? I mean, I think the first thing that I would do would just be to, this is a very hackish solution, would be to set a timeout for like 5 milliseconds.
Yeah, it's very hacky.
And then...
Because won't it just like stutter in some circumstances if it is too slow? Like, won't it?
Maybe. Let's give it a try.
Show some kind of imperfection?
I think so. Let's just see what it looks like, though. So what I'm going to do is also create a variable called this.closedHeight and set that to auto. And then I'm going to use the this.closedHeight over here. So at first, when it mounts, it's going to, this.closedHeight is going to be auto, so we can calculate it. But then after 5 seconds, we're going to want to set this.closedHeight to 0 pixels. So this might look a little strange because we have the transition going. So it might open and close. Oh, and also, we need to set closedHeight as a state variable. And the reason for this is we need React to re-render when the timer has surpassed.
Yeah.
Because right now what's happening is we're setting the value, but React is not changing the actual height because it doesn't need to re-render. So we'll do, closedHeight is auto in our state. And we'll get rid of the value down here. And then the timeout, we'll do this dot set state of closedHeight, and we'll set that to 0 pixels. And then we also can't forget to do this dot state dot closedHeight. And remember, we always got a destructure. So closedHeight. So now it's open at first and then they close initially. So that does look a little strange.
Yeah, it does.
But you'll see that it now works properly. So we'll get a little bit more hacky here. What do you say?
I don't know. I don't care for hacks, man. We're better than this. You're better than this.
I'm more curious about whether this will work. It's more of an experiment. So what we'll want to do is initially we don't want to have a transition because it's going to set the height to auto, calculate the height, and then close it. And if that happens quickly enough, we shouldn't see anything. But then when that timer starts, we want to set the transition back to active. So when the user clicks on it, we now have an active transition. So, well, I'm laughing just thinking about this. This is so ridiculous. We're going to want to set our transition to another state variable. So transition is set to transition. And of course, we have to make everything in JavaScript look beautiful.
Absolutely.
So we do this nice shorthand syntax. So if you ever see this in a JavaScript object of no colon, that just means that transition is equal to transition. So we'll get rid of that. Because transition is going to now be coming from this dot state.
Got it.
So transition will be, at first, we're going to want to do no transition. So we'll just do an empty string. I believe that's the best way. Maybe even none might be better if anyone in the audience knows whether to do none or just empty string. I think there's a small difference between them. But then when the timeout ends, we'll want to do transition 0.3 seconds all. So let's try this. So we refresh, looking good, and boom.
Slick.
Wait, no. Is the transition working? The transition is not working. Transition is not working. Let's take a look at this. Collapsible top. There is currently no transition in here. So something is not working well. Let's just take a look at this transition value.
Yeah, it's there. It's there.
Interesting. Oh, it's because we're putting it. I was dumb. I was putting it inside the expand more icon. So expand more always stays the 0.3 transition. Where we want to do the transition is on the bottom. So since we have the transition beforehand in the CSS file, we'll want to get rid of that. And we'll want to move it to the inline style. So transition.
And then go back to your collapsible, your other file that you were just in. Thought I noticed something weird going on. Oh, never mind. 0.05.
Yeah, it's just the color. That's a very, very light.
Got it.
Light.
I thought it was a typo at first.
Boom.
Nice.
There we go. We have it work. So let's refresh the page. You'll see nothing's going. Oh, something was going on. Yes, it looks like sometimes it works,
Yeah,
sometimes it doesn't.
Spazzes out sometimes.
But we're hacking here. Where's the proof of concept? So you'll see now that on reload, it sometimes stays static. And then when you click the button, we now have the collapsible heights. So I guess we explored a little bit of a hacking solution, but we got somewhere with it.
Yep. So yeah, this is good. Let me switch back to our news crew mode here. So that way it's just us and not your screen. Yeah, so this was round 2. I think it went a lot more successful than the first one. Although I was pretty impressed by the modal stuff. It was pretty slick. This was slick though too.
Thank you.
What's next on the agenda, man? What other fancy animation stuff do you have to show?
I think something I want to show next is the I don't even know how to call this, the shine skeleton effect. So you see sometimes on Facebook and YouTube, pretty much all the tech companies like Google, Amazon, you're loading a new item, they'll have this kind of gray, sometimes transparent, but light gray box that has this little shine that goes through. And that basically is a loading state.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of UX research done on how showing kind of a mock-up or wireframe of the page makes users perceive that the page is loading faster as opposed to a normal just spinning icon. So we could show you a nice little demo of how to implement those.
Yeah.
I believe in some of my maps that I've done, let's see. So I did a map for here the other day.
You want me to go back to your screen?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, we're back on your screen.
So if I refresh,
yep,
you see, and what we should do, a nice trick that I learned as well, is slowing down our internet speed so things take longer to load. So to do this, developer tools in Chrome, you could actually go and do slow 3G.
Wow.
So now when we refresh, things will take a little bit longer to load, and then you'll see the loading state a little bit longer. So we'll refresh, and you'll see we have this loading state moving around there.
I never knew that it was called the skeleton effect.
I believe that's named, like, yeah, skeleton shine effect. Yeah, skeleton screen loading effect.
Wow. How do you even stumble upon that?
Pretty nice.
Who would think to? How do you search for something like that? How do you get led to it becoming the skeleton effect? When you had to figure this out from somewhere, you type in Facebook loading screen or something, or? Yeah,
I think Facebook loading screen, because Facebook was the one probably invented it, maybe, I don't know, but they were definitely the first one to start implementing it in all the applications. Sure. And now it's for high quality product design. Yeah. Pretty much all applications that are built well have it, and I think it really does a good job for loading states. I think that's going to be definitely the new norm you see in a couple of years. And what's nice is even a lot of the CSS libraries, like there's a nice one that I've been using that some colleagues showed me called Chakra
Yep.
UI. They have a really nice skeleton component in here. So obviously, if you're using a design system like this, components, you could just use the module, but that's no fun. We're going to learn how to actually implement it ourselves.
No, that's cool. Let me go back. Oh, go on. You cut out again. Can't hear you.
No hearing?
There you go.
Oh, definitely. I think if you want like one pretty easy item to implement that will increase the product design quality of your application, a skeleton loading screen is definitely something you should consider.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I didn't even know it had a name, but I do like that effect whenever I see it.
Yeah.
Except for when it never actually loads because the page is spazzing out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was a great stream. I know that I cracked a lot of fun at jQuery. I kind of regret making so many wisecracks at it because I use jQuery still all the time. I think it's great. But no, this is great that we have alternatives for doing vanilla CSS, and more importantly, React, right?
Yeah, my headphones died again. Anyway, yeah, vanilla JavaScript is definitely the way to go with everything. I mean, obviously, in combination with React and such to use the vanilla JavaScript, but even vanilla JavaScript is really advancing, I think, on the web a lot to the point where you maybe don't even need React in the future. Who knows?
Yeah.
I was playing around with web components the other day. Obviously not as nice as React and such, but it's definitely laying the groundwork for what may be able to come in the future.
Sure. Yeah, so then this was good, and I hope that you come back on another stream, man.
Yeah, I think I will.
All right.